Okay, so what we're going to be doing now, after we have successfully rigged our model, and I'm going to take a look at, here we go. So after we successfully rigged our model, we're now going to go ahead and attach the geometry, which is called skinning. So we're going to be skinning our creature, our robot, and then after that, we will then adjust the weight of the influence of each bone by painting a different weight directly onto the geometry. Now, before we get started, there's a few things that I just want to quickly show you. So some of you may sit there and go, I really don't like all these representations of how the skeleton or the control system is being shown. Well, it's really easy to change. So if you come up here and you go into your character controls and have that on, coming over here you can go to your edit control rig look, and then you've got like 3 different types. So you can go for wire, or you can go for whatever suits you, whatever helps you to see things better. Personally, I tend to go for the stick one. It's just nice and simple. And another thing that would be good to know is when it comes to the size of joints, being able to control the size of joints is very, very, very helpful. So I'm just going to see if I can find something like actually, no, I will do it that one. Okay, so say you don't like the size of these. If we go over to display, and we go to animation, and we go to joint size, you can literally just blow it up or shrink it down to as big or as little as you like, just whatever helps you. So that's kind of important to know, just because it's always about comfort at the end of the day. So that out of the way, let's crack on to the next bit. So we now have our skeleton that we've gone ahead and used the quick rig tool in order to create, but we've also customized it. So the next step is now we're going to attach the skin to our deformation skeleton, because it's made up of 2 parts. So I'm flicking back and forth between these controls here. So what we have here is our control system, so the things that actually help us to move. This is our actual skeleton, and then this here is the deformation rig, and what we want is this to be attached to our skin, not the other 2. So with this one selected, I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of quickly group select the rig and the body and everything else in between. I suppose the easiest way you can do is just do that. So now that's all selected, the next thing I'm going to be doing is going over to skin. I'm going to bind the skin. I'm just going to go into the actual options just to double check that everything's there. What you want in the bind method is for it to be a geodesic voxel, and what that translates into is that the binding is actually based on the vertex. It's based on the vertices that are within the mesh. That's the one you want. Joint hierarchy and everything else is fine. Your max influence by default will be 5, but what you want it to be is 2. And what that basically means is that the geometry, whichever one it is, will only ever be influenced by up to a maximum of 2 bones, 2 separate objects. So you don't want it to go any more than that. You just want to keep it at around 2. And 2 is actually quite a sensible number using in games development. So once this is all done, you can go ahead and hit bind skin. Now this will take a few seconds. Now you'll know if it's successful because it will turn pink like it's just done here. So I now know that's been done successfully. So if I turn this off and go into my control system, and before previously, if you remember, we moved our rig and the skin would not move with it. So I'm just going to quickly grab this, come to the front here and just move, and yep, there you go. But if you take a close look at, I'm going to see if I can turn the edge faces off for a second. So if you take a close look around here, as I move my rig around, you can see that it deforms in a really odd way, and this is where the weight painting is going to come into play. This is what we're going to try and correct. Okay, so I'm going to undo that, and now I'm going to move on to weight painting. Now there's a couple of ways to get to it, but the easiest way is literally just to select the mesh, to right click, and then go down to paint, skin cluster paint weights. Now it should turn black. Now sometimes it doesn't, purely because in the viewport under renderer, if it has any of these other variations, it won't show. Make sure it's on viewport 2.0 and it should turn black. And the same for this one here. So try to shift all your viewports, the renderer to 2.0 and renderer 2.0 and one more, renderer 2.0. Okay, now currently the bone that's selected is right here in the thigh, and all of this that you're seeing, if I zoom in, is the area of influence. That is, it's almost like a radiation of heat, if you want to look at it like that. So where it's the hottest point is where it's got the most control, and then that influence just kind of dies out as it goes towards the ends. Now, if it was an organic creature, we're made up of muscles and sinew and all kinds of lovely gooey stuff, then that would happen. But this is a robot. It doesn't happen with him. So we need to make sure that this is completely solid with very clean edges to define the deformation. And the way we're going to do that is by using the weights. Now, before we get started, over here you've got your character window open, but what would also be handy is to make sure that you have this window open. This is the tool settings for the paintbrush that we now have. And here is a list of all the lovely bones. So if you click on each one, it will go ahead and rotate through them, and you'll be able to quickly access the bones and work on its area of influence on the skin. Now, over here, we have a selection of different painting and paintbrush type materials. Now, if you've done your fair share of even using like Windows Paint, then you'll have a good idea as to what these sort of do. So you've got like a soft edged brush, which has a nice sort of, it goes very solid in the middle and dies out around the edges. You've got something that's completely hard edged, a bit more solid to use. Square brushes, in case you're doing anything that involves any kind of sharp edge geometry, that's also quite useful to use. But at the moment, the only one we're going to really be using is this one, the soft brush. Make sure that paint operations are on replace and nothing else. This is because, frankly, with things like scale, when you are maneuvering weights and influences around in different locations, it will take from one area but add to the other. So there's that constant yin-yang balance going on, and that is for another day. So we're just going to focus on nice, straightforward replacement weight. Now, in terms of here, we have skin weight interactive. That's what we want. And this is what we're mainly working with, the value. This is our paint, so to speak. So for example, right now, so if I was to try and find that horrible thigh, where is it? And this is where I have to kind of try and find it. And the easy way to find it also is you can just sort of type and search for it as well. And right shoulder. That's really strange, it's not coming up on the list. Okay. I'll do this one. Okay, so right up leg, it should be right left leg. Left up leg. So I'll do this leg. So rotating around, as you can see, I'm going to zoom in as well. Now, my paintbrush size, if I wanted to change it because it was too big, now I'm working on a Windows system, so it may be slightly different on a Mac, but I'm holding down B, and whilst my cursor is still over the object itself, the model itself, I'm holding down my left mouse button and I'm shifting my mouse from left to right just to change the size of the brush. So if I want to get some more detail work in, I'd go really tiny, but something like that would do me fine. Just something small, just to do the job. Now, as I said, the value is your paint. So for example, if I went over here, started painting, you can see, actually that's too small, I'm going to go a bit bigger actually. There you go. So as I start painting, you can see it's going black. So the value is 0. This, I'm taking away the area of influence from the bone, which is here. Now this area I don't want to disrupt. It's fine. This is exactly what it should be in control of. So I'm just going to rotate around and work my way through. Now it's just going to be selecting whatever the cursor is pointing at, and the area of influence of where it drops out is where the size of the brush is also indicating. And then this is just the case of literally going around and painting the weight directly onto the geometry. Now what you're doing is you're actually painting the information onto the vertices. So it's the vertices that are going to carry out this information. So I'm just going to very carefully, there we go, just work my way through. Try and get that ball joint, just to very quickly show you how this works. There we go. Now, working with inorganic materials such as robots, buildings, cars, I don't know, pistons perhaps, you are always working with black and white, strict black and white. It's never going to be shades of grey. It's always going to be black and white. Whenever you are dealing with organics, it's going to be shades of grey and all kinds of stuff. Now, if you are sick of seeing grey, or you want a little bit more detail in terms of how much influence something's happening, and this is really good for organics, come down here to gradient and you can use something called the color ramp. Now if I click on the color ramp, you can see this is the area of influence, and this is actually what's happening. So even though I've painted it black, it's still very much got that very teeny tiny amount of influence still. So again, you won't ever get 1000% clean just from weight painting. You would have to adjust many other things like joint positioning, the geometry. There's lots and lots of little tweaks and lots of things that go behind the scene, but as a starting position, this is a pretty good place to go. So if you were dealing with organics, this would be something that you'd be using more of, is the color ramp. But we're dealing with robotics, so black and white is the best way to go. So I'm just going to very quickly just finish up now, move down here and deal with this one. The ball joint, let's see, it's the upper thigh. Yeah, ball joint's fine. I'll leave the ball joint influenced as well. Now, question being, what happens if I paint this black? Whoops, made a mistake. Okay, quite simply, you would go grab this, yank it to the other position, and just go over it, just like you would with an eraser. But also take a look at the shades of grey involved, because as you can see, this is slightly darker. That means there is still some negative influence going on with this. So you can just go back and forth, back and forth. Whoops, I've already gone and done it again. So there you go, I've made a mistake. I crank that back down. I come back, I clean up the mess. Or you can just simply hit undo. Okay, but just to kind of show you the result, so I've kind of did a little bit of cleanup around the pelvis, if you remember that deformation that was going on. So I'm now going to come out of here. Let's see if I can get a hold of this. So, nope, I want my controls actually. So let's come out of this, get my move tool, select this, and come up to the top. Now I'm going to zoom in here so that you can see a little better what is going to happen here. And I'm now going to move this, and as you can see, there is no deformation whatsoever, just a nice smooth movement of the robot leg, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so now that you have an idea about weight painting, I'm going to undo this as well. Now you have an idea about weight painting, your job is to go through and correctly weight paint this entire model, remembering to jump backwards and forwards, coming in and out of paint, and being able to test and see if your paint judgment was correct. Once you are done, please make sure to upload on the link provided under the animation unit.